Hi, everyone. Ariana Friedlander here with Rosabella Consulting, and welcome to the Co-Creators in Conversation podcast, where we celebrate leaders who are challenging the status quo and creating economic value by caring about their people. This week, I am excited to be speaking with Peter DiMuro, Executive Artistic Director of the Dance Complex and founder and artistic director of Public Displays of Motion. Welcome, Peter. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks so much. I'm honored. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, and I wonder if you could take a moment to just introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about your background and these two different roles and organizations that you are leading right now.
Sure. I'll do the haiku version, but I'm not going to stick to 575 because that would just be too much. But,
I won't be counting, so we're good.
All right, good. Thank you. So I am a career-long artist. I've been making a living by either performing dances or teaching or creating dances since my 20s. And I said by the time I was 30, if I wasn't making a living at it, I would switch careers. But I made it through the 30s, definitely. And
Nice.
Going on a couple of decades after that. And in my, so I have I have several jobs, but two of the major ones are, one is, as you said, the Executive Artistic Director at the Dance Complex, which is a 30-year-old dance studio. It's hard to explain it in one word because we do so much. We are a professional training center, but also a community center in Cambridge, Mass. And we've had an amazing run of 30 years, 150 plus classes a week in all genres, forms, from stage forms of, classical ballet and modern, as well as indigenous forms, dances from the world over. And we also. What's
the age group of the students
it's
there?
Very wide. So ages 3 to 93.
Nice.
And we're an amazing, on a Saturday, if you're here and you walk from Studio 6, which is way at the top, all the way down to Studio 7, which is in the bottom, which makes no sense, but it makes sense to us. You'll pass through, different world cultures, from Spain and flamenco to several African countries with African dance to capoeira from Brazil, and
Wow.
The people who practice these dances are an amazing. Some people are born to these cultures, and some adopt these cultures as they start to learn the movement of these places. It's an amazing and freeing, and we've been called the United Nations of Dance because of the work that we naturally do, and then we seek out others who don't think dance is the answer, doesn't hold a place for them, and this includes immigrant families and LGBTQ plus teens and elders. We did an amazing project last year, Veterans Day, with vets of all ages, their families, and also active duty military in a performance of movement, of dance. We got these people dancing and telling their stories on stage. So
it sounds like a really eclectic dance studio. I mean, like way more so than the one I grew up going to as a child, where it was like ballet and jazz, and that was it.
Right. And I think there's something about the categorization, like all of us, like in anything, the public, knows the slice of things that is the norm. And that's a given. We have dance in the realm of dance moms on television, which is, just really not pretty. And hey,
I'm a mom that dances. What are you saying?
But you're not like, fighting in espionage and and trying to put, poison in a girl's, point shoes, things like that.
Oh, it's just, interesting. Okay.
It's very like Real Housewives.
A little counterculture.
Yeah. So, but I think we really push the idea, of intersectionality, intergenerational work, intersectionality, intercultures, and all that kind of thing here. And then my other life is related but somewhat different. Is that I founded and I run a company of collaborators, called Public Displays of Motion, and it's the little trick there is Peter DiMuro has 3 capital letters, PDM, and Public Displays of Motion has 3 capital letters. So it seemed to make sense at the time. And this company is also intergenerational and somewhat intersectional in the sense that we all come from very different movement backgrounds. The ages in the core company are probably 17 to just under 70, but we often work in partnership with other communities. So we have done work with the different communities, diasporic Latinx communities, intergenerational queer communities as well. And so often we accumulate more and more folks. We have 2 or 3 people from who are dancers with disabilities who are recurring guests, because I feel that the information in those bodies and the way they've adapted dance to work communicates something very much needed. So those companies, so that's the company, and we do project to project. We're perform on site specific places, as well as in theaters, and a little more on film more recently, which is kind of fun.
Oh, cool. Now tell listeners, because I think it's helpful to understand the distinction like between the dance complex and public displays of motion. So
Sure.
how would you characterize the way that they are distinctly different?
Well, the first one that's different is that I'm in the dance complex right now, and someone's about to start class.
Authentic.
Yeah. I'm sitting in the dance complex right now, and the dance complex is an idea, but it's also a physical place where there are studios for performances and classes, and the teaching artists who are here, they pay rent for their studios, and then in turn, their students pay them tuition. And so we are the
business model. Yes,
and it started 30 years ago when we were just kind of out of the kind of very cooperative period. Like Berkeley, California, and Cambridge, Mass. are probably the 2 best places to have this kind of model, so that people became entrepreneurs or micro business owners in a more today's kind of language. So the dance complex holds this idea that there is no other in dance. And we've pushed that to the nth degree, especially with the groups that I mentioned earlier, where there are workshops with veterans or other folks. So I'd say the dance complex is more often the space and the literal platform, the stage itself, through which or upon which people express themselves, and we kind of enable and encourage the illuminating of different voices in that way in the building, and through our whatever grant work that we put out there. We're just trying to create programming that creates juxtaposition of who these people are and the dances that they dance. So we might do during COVID, for instance, we were heavily involved with the Business Improvement District here in Cambridge, in Central Square, and they built an outdoor stage, one of the first performance series in the country that spring summer was right here with us. So we put on 17 concerts, many of which were multiple voices on the same stage, to show that dance needed to happen. We wouldn't let dance die on our watch. That the combination of these voices, if people had never come in the building before, we were going to bring the dance out to them on this outdoor stage. Nice. So before COVID, I would have said, "Oh, it's the building," but now I realize, no, it's never been just the building. It is about who we are in this building and who's dancing. And
and there's a commitment, if I understand correctly, in the dance complex. Like you're committed to a student for a period of time, and they're on a journey and experiencing a progression on that journey as guided by their teacher and maybe also their peers.
Yeah, I would say when I got here 10 years ago, and to go way backwards in time, I made my professional debut on the stage that I now run here at the dance complex. So I was 20 something. This is even before it was the dance complex. Wow. And at the time, it was this kind of place where in many circles in around the country that aren't just about performance companies that are about entertainment only, which is wonderful, or if you're a company that is touring as your main, work, then the whole world is your community. But this community is based right here. And so when I got here 10 years ago, I realized there's something I've learned from having been on the road. And that is that when you lean into change, or you lean into evolution, it allows this idea of like, just the lean itself is about movement, right? As opposed to the staticness. When we're static and we do the same thing we did the day before, or take the same class we always did, you can devolve into, you can go backwards, because there's no inertia bringing you forward.
I feel like that's so relatable to where we're at with the situation with COVID. And I've even had to learn for myself, to connect in with my body. Our screens can be so entrancing, and we can just go into like just scrolling. I know some people talk about doom scrolling, and that's where you might get lost in social media. But I know for myself, sometimes it's just like this ambleness where I'll check my email, and then I'll look at an article I'm trying to write, or I'll just kind of get stuck in the screen trance. And I don't make progress until I step away from my computer and get out of my head and into my body. And that might look like going for a walk, or doing yoga, or as I did right before this, have a dance party in my house.
Nice.
So
That's great.
It is. It's really fun. I sometimes wonder if my neighbors ever notice. Not that it matters, but like that really makes a difference, right? Like moving into my body helps me shift forward, helps me make progress, helps me get unstuck. And when I say in my head, it's just, it's like a cesspool almost. It's not productive.
No,
I really relate to that.
And it's dulling. I mean, it's like we become dullards in a way, when we do that thing. Even, like I've just discovered TikTok, heaven forbid, and I get lulled by the shortness of them, and the same thing you're talking about. And I really do. I do have to pull back. But I think that this phenomenon you're talking about, a lot of us have experienced it over the years, but I think it has become so extreme during COVID that it's actually pushed like, oh, there's not a problem. What are you talking about? It's a little like the person who says, oh, I rarely drink, but I have a drink every night. It's like it's like, I'm on the screen, but I'm not on the screen that much. I think we've just pushed ourselves so much to this now that that good people like you are realizing, oh my God, I have to flip the coin, and I've just got to go get physical,
Right. Well, and context is everything too. So, it's like, oh, I don't drink much compared to these other people that drink the second they get up in the morning, or whatnot. So, it's like, and same with the screen. Oh, I don't spend that much time on my screen. I'm only on it 8 to 10 hours a day.
Right. I know that's always scary when you get the week's surmisal of our time,
Right.
We have seen, here, like we opened at the complex, we closed March, 16th, 17th, whatever it was, of 2020. And then July 15th, we opened up to about 27% of the classes and 27% of the people. We just had a half-hour cleanings in between. But you could tell it was palpable that people, even after that relatively short period, which was April, May, June, 4 months, they needed it so badly. And then as COVID has ebbed and flowed a bit, another like we stayed open throughout all this a year and some months now. Yeah,
which is a feat in and of itself.
Yeah, I have to say, I get a little emotional because I wasn't going to let dance die on my watch. It just felt like that we just saw everything closing down, and we didn't want to be. We wanted to listen to science, and we didn't want to be, frivolous to the science at all. But at that point, it's July 15th and every month since, it's the relief that I see in people's eyes behind their masks, because they're still dancing with masks on here. But they need to be physical in a different way, that, like you were talking about. And this is as much their mental health, which affects their physical health as well. So if there's a risk to taking class, we are taking it because people need to be mentally and physically balanced.
And there's a risk to not too, right? Yes. There's a risk to just sitting in front of your screen, to letting isolation just encumber you. It's not like that's a risk-free choice.
Exactly. There's risk everywhere. You're right.
Yeah.
So
I remember when we spoke earlier, one of the things that you had shared that inspired you to step into this role at the dance complex was a desire to show how your history and experience as an artist could empower you and enable you to successfully lead an organization.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what it is. Like, what is it about being an artist that you see correlates so nicely? Because I think we have a lot of creative people that listen, and it would be helpful for them to see those connections, to see how those dots have been drawn for someone like yourself.
Yeah, well, I will admit to a bit of defiance. You know, I'm from, you know, a very stoic Midwestern. My father's side of the family is Italian, as you can tell because I keep gesturing, and my mother's side is Danish, and a very stoic kind of, you know, Danish, you know, very principled, hardworking, hard-headed people, and at least our family. All the other Danes that I've met outside my family are wonderful, and so I'm going to get in trouble for all this all around. But anyway, the idea that you know, after 30 years of dancing, and I had my own company in Boston in the early days, and you know, learning how to run my own business and to, you know, to work 7 jobs and make it all make sense. In essence, you're already running 7 little businesses. You're teaching, you're performing, you're, you know, you're touring, you're doing all these other things. And the work that I was doing with a woman named Liz Lerman, who introduced me to this idea of intergenerational work, but it was really about intersectionality. It's really about taking the either or and erasing that and putting and. So I am an artist and I'm an arts administrator. I'm a gay man of a certain age, and I'm also a caring partner, a caring son to my mother as she was dying. These, you know, they're not ors in our world, you know, as much as people would like to do that. And so when you know, 10 years ago or so, as I was looking to not be in academia because I couldn't make that fit. That was where I was supposed to go as a dancer, and having had somewhat of a career, and that's where they expect you to go. And I thought, well, this job is up, and I've done everything that's on this requirement list. I've managed people in a dance studio, and if there's nothing more about like the need for people to understand the ebb and flow of human dynamics, they should all visit a dance rehearsal, because you are collaborating, you're making, you're leading, you're following, you're silent, you're dealing with the nonverbal, you're dealing with the verbal. It is a very complete office world. And so what I didn't book learn as far as like, you know, business psychology 101, I think I lived it. And I think in the first well, I think we've done pretty well in the 8 years that I've been here doing this. We won business-wise. We've been very successful. We went from having a very non-relatable idea of what it was to have a set of books, a set of accounting. We actually had 3 books, 3 sets of accounts. Now we have one.
Oh, amazing.
I know, right. You know, and from the idea that, you know, there was a legal pad with, you know, with 15 donors listed on it. And I said, well, I think that we could approach this in a more scientific way. So we've got, you know, the app and the software to keep track of things. But it made sense to embrace the business of it, as opposed to say, oh, that's not me, because it's me and I'm still an artist. And yes, I think there are times when I flounder, I make mistakes. We all do. You know, that kind of thing. But I know this world so well that I feel like, and even through COVID, it was like, what is important for us? We got intentional with how, you know, like, so we have all these entrepreneurs who have their little micro businesses, and how do we keep them afloat? We could have just said, sorry, doors are closed, you can't make any money anymore. Well, we decided not to do that, because we had to lead with our heart as well as our head. So we put together an artist rental relief fund, a fundraising effort, which in like a matter of 2 weeks had $12,000 in it, which was a lot for this little fund. But
That's
what
fantastic.
That fund did was enable every artist to come back with some kind of discount or free month of rent or whatever, so that they can make the jump back in.
Right.
And I'm sure there's some business term to that, but that was led by the heart and excuse me, damn common sense to the idea that we have nothing in this building if we don't have our teaching artists teaching dance.
So, yeah, without people, there is no business.
Right. So I feel like we're, and I get more and more happy, and I feel more authentic because I, in a dance rehearsal, sure, there is a version of a dance company that is about cutthroat and oh, you're out and you broke your leg because I tripped you down the stairs and now I'm going to take your role. There is that version of, it's a very dramatic, it's that kind of dance company thing. But there are also dance companies that run on a very much a balance of human dynamics and good business sense and the balance of all that, and that's good information. So we should have that inside our administration too.
I love that you're sharing that, and I think that it is so important for people to hear because whenever we do look at business, be it an artistic business or a manufacturing business, and say it can only be one way, and that one way has to pay employees as little as possible to maximize profit margins, or be a cutthroat competitive environment. Then you're missing out on so much possibility. And I feel like what you just described with how your artistic background has enabled you to run a successful business is one of the pieces of creativity that I think often gets lost is there's a functional component.
Yeah.
And you can't just creativity just doesn't appear when you want it to, and you just roll with it and it's all beautiful rainbows and sunshine. There's a functional piece of being a creative that you have to show up, you have to do the work. There has to be some order and form to the way you are doing your work. And that translates into running a business beautifully if you're able to expand your thinking of what those different pieces mean in different contexts.
Very. I mean, all of us, whatever we do, and all of us who learned how to pivot, we've been pivoting in dance forever, right?
See, I mean, the inventors of pivoting, right?
Step pivot. And I'd say that even more so the nonprofit dance world, and I know there's a better term for nonprofit, I forget what it is right now, but this idea that we have to pivot all the time because the funding structures are almost non-existent for small mom and pop dance companies or businesses like us. So we learn how to live, hopefully without PTSD about it, but we learn how to live always shifting the landscape. And when a funding cycle changes or the support changes, I try to find out what's the authentic line through our work that can support the work that we do with veterans or with LGBTQ plus youth or whatever it is that, and the great thing about that is that you're so true to yourself,
right?
And you're adapting and adopting that when it comes time. Just the other day, after our chat previously, I was sitting with a couple who invited me to have dinner, and because they said, and I feel like I'm patting myself on the back, but only in light of this the idea of the chat. They said, you've created such a brand about the dance complex. We want to support your vision, and so that my vision has been adaptable and somewhat fluid, but always authentic. I hope now other people are noticing that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's the reward, because they're adapting their giving to the vision versus me always having to adapt to the philanthropic, outer world.
And it's such a different ask too, right? It's such a different ask when you say, here's the vision, here's this future that we are working towards, versus we don't know if we're going to make rent next month or pay our mortgage or whatever. Like, we need money to cover our bills. Will you please help us? Like, there's such different leverage in that type of ask, and so much possibility and excitement when you can paint that vision and it's coming from that place of authenticity. It really does inspire engagement and contribution in meaningful ways, instead of just please help us, we need you.
Right.
It's a different dynamic. It's hard to believe we are almost at time. It's been really cool to hear your stories. I know. I want to come back to, I asked earlier, kind of the distinction between the dance complex and public displays of motion.
Sure.
And I always like to conclude around what it means to co-create. And I was wondering if you could kind of tie those both in together. I remember you talked about doing a project with public displays of motion called Stones to Rainbows, and was wondering if you could tell us about what that project was and how you practice co-creating.
Sure.
In that project.
Yeah, and that's kind of the penultimate project, because all that we've gotten to this idea of collaboration today in 2021, kind of almost post-COVID and everything. But so all the projects of public displays are collaborative, and each dancer is listed as a either core collaborator or they've all invested their own movement and personal movement histories into the work, and we accumulate those, much as you do in an office meeting, and you're having a creative session, like, what should we do next year, and everybody's offering ideas. And in my world, our world, we get to actually use every single idea around the table, and yes, we curate it and we finesse it. And sometimes I equate it to, like, we're all furniture makers, and we've made the furniture, and now I'm rearranging how it all fits in this beautiful home we have called performance. And so that's always the case. With Stones to Rainbows, the full title is Stones to Rainbows: Gay to Queer Lives. We had this idea that from a rehearsal that 4 years ago now. I was in rehearsal with two of my younger dancers, one in their 20s, one in their 30s, and we were making a dance for a memorial service for a gay man who had died of Parkinson's due to complications of Parkinson's. And we got talking about, well, here's a man of a certain age who didn't die during the AIDS crisis. That brought on the question of, what was the AIDS crisis really like, Peter? You lived through it, and I just read about it in history books. My mind just blew, because it was the conversation I had with my father about World War II and how he didn't want to talk about it. And I didn't think that I had become like frozen against that time, but apparently I cracked, my armor just cracked in that moment, and a little bit now. And so it was just, that seemed to be like this moment of, okay, feel this, feel what you're feeling, feel that cracked armor. This is important. And how do we set up other conversations among intergenerational queer folks, a term which we did not use in my day, and it's another example of the journey that gay people of my age and queer people today, even what we call ourselves. We set up about 100 conversations. About 50 conversations with about 100 people, where we looked at age, but also intersectionality. And if someone identified as lesbian, older lesbian, we might put them with a younger trans person. And these conversations were videotaped, and sound was pulled from them to create an installation of talking heads against these beautiful cut open closet doors that have light emanating from them. And from that, we've built these cabarets where some of the folks who were interviewed now are performing their live music or their spoken word or their dance. And but the installation lives as itself. And it really is truly a platform where the only art that I've really created here is the platform for it. And that was built on collaboration with my dancers. But there will be a little bit more, but that to me is like, wow, I really let go in a good way, where I didn't need any of one of my stories in there or one of my dances. And I'm very pleased and proud with how it's coming out, and it keeps growing and changing. And we hope to visit a new university or a new city, or go to Provincetown and interview people there and add their stories to the installation, so it can be of a place as well as of Boston and all that.
That is so moving, and especially to recognize the effort and time and energy that went into having these conversations and curating and collecting these stories to inform the dance and the installation, and that it wasn't just this, oh, I have this great idea and I'm going to execute and build this platform. It really was this back and forth and give and take. And there was a lot that went on behind the scenes before you even got to choreographing something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're still there. Like actually the next pieces for us to be PDM, actually choreographing like the transitional dances that will happen in and among these performances. And the piece could live without them, or the installation could, but it feels to me like this project has this growth and evolution from that 4 years ago conversation to now, and probably into the future, so that feels really good. Feels really good.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, if people wanted to connect with you or check out this installation for Stones to Rainbows and Public Displays of Motion or the Dance Complex, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably through come to the website first, because then that holds more information. So with Dance Complex, it's dancecomplex.org. Okay. And with Public Displays of Motion, you might guess it's Public Displays, that's plural, Public Displays of Motion, singular, at .com.
Okay, and we'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah. And I think that gives an overview of what's going on. And there are there's a special website for Stones to Rainbow. There's a wonderful project we did where we made literal tactile postcards during COVID that have postcard-sized video dances that go with them. So it's all between those two websites. And we'll include
the Stones to Rainbow website as well.
Yes.
I mean, there's no limit. We can add in as many URLs as there are we're pointing people towards. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for joining us for the Co-Creators in Conversation interview series and sharing your story. It's so awesome to hear the way that you have woven together your artistic background into creating a viable and sustainable business, especially one that is thriving despite COVID. And really being a place for people to come and heal and express themselves and be a part of a community that's inclusive. I love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Ariana. I so appreciate the time to talk to someone other than myself in my room.
My pleasure. And thanks to our listeners for joining us today. As always, if you want to continue getting updates about Co-Creators in Conversation interviews, you may subscribe or sign up on our website, rosabellaconsulting.com. And if there's one thing that you gained from this conversation, maybe identify a specific action you can take to apply that insight and lesson learned, because that's where the beauty really happens. So thank you to Peter, and thank you to our listeners for joining us this time. Take care.